What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review the new flick Lisa Frankenstein, a movie where I went into it with modest expectations, but I was hoping for the best. But I have to say that I think it's kind of a mediocre misfire across the board, but with tons of potential where, as you're watching it, you can kind of read between the lines and see all the different scenes and moments and beats that the filmmakers are reaching for, but never quite pull off, because on paper, or at least on the surface, it's got a lot of things going for it. You have a teenage love story set in 1989. I mean, usually that's all you need, but you've got undead and you've got murder and mutilation and small dash of nostalgia and, sentimental needle drops and that sort of thing. But you also have teenagers trying to lose their virginity and castration and suicide and even a little menstruation thrown in there for good measure. But having now seen the movie, I think the movie's best bet is going to be to play to young teens, teenagers who want a little bit of goth in their humor. They want a little blood, but they don't want to go quite all the way yet. Kind of like how teenagers are with the physical act of love. Some of them are just not quite ready for the wild rides that the R-rated movies have to offer. And I feel like, if you like your movies a little tame and a little bland and a little vanilla, Lisa Frankenstein at least gives the appearance of outrageousness without actually taking you into John Waters territory or something like that. But I must admit that it wounds me to say anything negative about this movie, because from 2007 to 2011, I had the world's biggest crush on the screenwriter, Diablo Cody. And let's do a little experiment real quick, without even looking anything up. How many screenwriters can you name that are active right now where you even know, you know them by name for their work writing movies, but without actually directing movies or starring in them? And she has directed one movie, and she's popped in for some little cameos and that sort of thing. But in general, she is a screenwriter. She is a successful screenwriter who's been a successful screenwriter for almost 20 years now. But it's hard to even think of any screenwriters right now unless they come from the world of TV. And those aren't screenplays, those are teleplays. So I'm thinking just for the movies, how many writers can you think of? And so Diablo Cody, she's one of those rare kind of brand name recognition writers out there, but also it's Hollywood needs more hot strippers who are also Oscar-winning screenwriters. If you don't know how she made a name for herself, it was with her autobiography, writing a book about her year working as a stripper, and then she transitioned from that into writing Juno, where she won an Oscar right out of the gate. And I'm like, that's fucking cool. This is somebody who is beautiful and sexy and hilarious and creative and that sort of thing. So there are a lot of reasons to be excited about Diablo Cody. But then she followed up Juno with Jennifer's Body. And while Juno is probably the more respectable movie and the more kind of Oscar friendly or art house friendly, yada, 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 but Jennifer's Body actually was a pretty fun, pretty cool little sexy horror flick. I mean, you got Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried in their prime, in all their glory, delivering laughs and gore and teenage makeout scenes and all this. I mean, Jennifer's Body is a rip-roaring good time at the movies, and you can tell that Lisa Frankenstein would like to be as outrageous or entertaining or as memorable as Jennifer's Body, but in spite of Diablo Cody's recent revelation that Lisa Frankenstein is set in the same fictional universe, there's no actual evidence within the movie, or at least if there was any evidence, I didn't make the connection, because once again, this is 1989, and Jennifer's Body, if memory serves, is just set in 2009 whenever it came out. But Lisa Frankenstein wishes it were half as entertaining and half as enjoyable as Jennifer's Body overall. And I feel like every filmmaker in their mind needs to know, in their mind at least, what is the best version of the movie that we're trying to make. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll get there. We'll get halfway there with all the various compromises that one must endure while making a movie. But who are the rest of the people that are responsible for this movie, Lisa Frankenstein? Let's share the blame, because I love Diablo Cody too much to lay the entire blame of Lisa Frankenstein at her doorstep. But we also have first-time director Zelda Williams. That's probably one of the big problems there. I feel like sometimes first-time directors, especially in the world of horror and teen sex comedies and that sort of thing, they can just knock you flat with their first time at bat. Zelda Williams just seems to have done what I would describe as a serviceable, kind of predictable, by-the-numbers approach where there's nothing too outrageous, there's nothing too threatening. It all feels safely packaged and put on the shelf and safe for consumption and that sort of thing. And I feel like when you're making a movie for $13 million, even if it's your first movie, that gives you the freedom to take some big swings. And even if you miss with some of those big swings, at least take the big swings. This is not some $200 million fucking Marvel movie where everybody's afraid to even say a swear word without offending half the audience. This is a teenage undead love story, and I feel like, just fucking go for it. First and foremost, making this movie a PG-13 movie. I don't know if they set out to make it PG-13, if they were contractually obliged to make it PG-13, but this movie is screaming for a hard R and a real, genuine, authentic, and frank look at what it was like to be in high school in 1989. And I was in middle school in 1989, so I don't quite know. I didn't hit high school until 1991. But I remember this era really well, and it was just fucking outrageous. But I should also mention that this movie stars Kathryn Newton, and to be fair, Kathryn Newton, I feel like she's really going for it, even when the director is not. She's fantastic in this and looks great. We have Cole Sprouse, who everyone knows and loves from that show Riverdale. I saw one episode, but yeah, if you like your Jughead to be attractive as opposed to a weird goober who eats too much, then yeah, watch Riverdale. And we've got Lisa Soberano, Henry Eikenberry, Joe Crest, and Carla Gugino. And Carla Gugino, I've had the world's biggest crush on her for like fucking decades. Sadly, she's kind of horrible in this movie, and it wounds me to say this. I mean, all these filmmakers and actors who I really admire just delivering a piss poor movie. But the loose inspiration for this flick is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which came out over 200 years ago, and here we are, still talking about it, still trying to get it right. And I feel like, maybe the closest we ever came to capturing kind of the spirit of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is the framing device from Bride of Frankenstein, where we actually see Mary Shelley talking with all of her friends about the novels that she's writing. But I don't feel like we've ever had a movie that like really, like in a pitch perfect way, captures the original Frankenstein novel. And probably won't ever happen. It's a romantic gothic horror novel from over 200 years ago that is a hard style and tone to replicate in 2024. But in broad strokes, this movie tells the story of a misunderstood teenage goth girl who reanimates a Victorian-era corpse and works to make him into the man of her dreams. It's a weird thing, though. It's like, it's America in 1989 in a small town, and yet they have this really wild gothic graveyard where you've got Victorian gentlemen who are like unto the manor born buried there. That doesn't make any fucking sense at all. But basically, she raises him. Actually, she didn't even really do it herself. Somehow he just comes back from like a freak storm. But because he's kind of incomplete and like missing different body parts over the course of the movie, as she's trying to make him into the boy of her dreams, they start removing certain body parts from certain people who are not nice and must be chopped into little pieces and buried like in the backyard so that her boyfriend can slowly get hotter and hotter and that sort of thing. But film history is littered with examples of movies that kind of provide the template for the style and tone and structure of a movie like this. And so I get why somebody would want to recreate the magic of a movie like Weird Science or a movie like Beetlejuice. These are movies that I grew up on watching over and over and over again, laughed uproariously every time. I love movies that mix a little high school, a little science fiction, a little horror, a little sex, a little bit of everything. They kind of stir it all together for an intoxicating brew. And when you get that formula right, Jesus Christ, you can create like an all-time classic. Probably the heavyweight champion of the style and tone they're going for, but didn't quite have the balls to go after would be a movie like Heathers, where Heathers is fucking vicious and Heathers is nasty, and it's got lines in there like fuck me gently with a chainsaw and things like that. It's a wild goddamn movie. This movie, Lisa Frankenstein, is nowhere near as cool as Heathers. It's not even near as cool as fucking Jennifer's Body, Diablo Cody's earlier flick. But I'm going to recommend a random obscure movie from the late 70s. If you want to watch a high school movie where you got all the violence and murder and mayhem that you could ever ask for, in a movie that was loosely kind of remade as Heathers about 10 or 12 years later, I'm going to recommend Massacre at Central High. Very obscure, very hard to find, wildly inappropriate in so many ways, and tonally has these very strange shifts. You're like, wait a second, what are the good guys doing? Oh my God, what are the bad guys doing? It's hard to know kind of where you stand when you're watching that movie. But yeah, Lisa Frankenstein is no Massacre at Central High. But let's get into a little more detail, trying to figure out where this went wrong. And I think just in general, it just feels a little bit amateur. Like there's scenes where you can tell, all right, structurally in the story, this is the big beat where she has her first kill, or this is the big beat where she finally starts dressing like a little goth princess, and really showing her true self. Or this is the scene where she finally gets to, hook up with a boy for the first time. Like all these big dramatic beats, but they always feel rushed or kind of artificial, almost like they're like shoving us into these moments without actually earning it or doing the heavy lifting or doing any of like the organic storytelling work to get us there naturally. Overall, it just felt like a very safe, very like made-for-TV approach that probably would have had like a better home on a big streaming service as opposed to in the theater. I feel like if you're going to get people to go to the theater, well, then you got to really show them something special to make them get their butt off the couch, go to a theater, put down money. It's like at that point, their expectations are pretty goddamn high, and they want to see something, really exciting, really dynamic, really interesting. And it's like, don't play it fucking safe, especially like I said, $13 million budget, they could afford to take a few risks. And with the movie set in 1989, obviously you're going to get all your kind of cultural touchstones from that period, some of which are more obscure than others. Like if you like REO Speedwagon, I'd say the best scene of the movie by far, one where I actually did feel some little chills in my neck, was when they were singing that song. What the hell's it called? Like, I always forget the exact name of the song. It's like, I Can't Stop This Feeling Anymore, or maybe it's shorter than that. But everybody, it's their hit, their big hit that everybody knows and loves. But they whip out that song for a particular scene where I was like, God damn. I was like, if the whole movie were like this, it would be a fucking smash. It would be like, just an emotional roller coaster for young teens. But like you also, of course, have like your teenagers that walk around with like Violent Femmes t-shirts. And I used to fucking love the Violent Femmes. My friends and I in the early 90s would ride around the car in my station wagon singing the Violent Femmes as a group without irony, and even learn to play a few of their songs on the bass. So I enjoy all those little touchstones. But some of the ones that feel a little weird, a little random, Lisa Frankenstein's obsessed with silent movies. And I get if they would do kind of, I guess like you mentioned movies like Nosferatu, but she starts talking about how she likes G.W. Pabst. And G.W. Pabst, I mean, he is one of the great directors of that period, making movies like Pandora's Box. I mean, he was a great luminary, but it just felt really weird and pretentious and like just shoving this stuff into the movie. It's like, this doesn't match or kind of go with anything else in this movie. And it doesn't even match like the object of her affection. She's into a guy who died 200 years ago. Well, then talk about poetry. Talk about Edgar Allan Poe. Talk about those kinds of influences. It just, there's a lot of evidence scattered throughout this movie that it doesn't quite know what movie it wants to be. And it kind of dies on that hill where it never quite succeeds at being any of those one movies that different fans might want the movie to become. And it's kind of like, it's trying to satisfy all of them, but none of them all that thoroughly. But I think the one thing this movie is really missing is that signature snappy dialogue that Diablo Cody really used to excel at in Juno, Jennifer's Body, and then Young Adult, which I think are her three best scripts. Actually, this might be the only movies by her that I've seen. I didn't ever see Ricky and the Flash, whatever that fucking movie was called, but she's done some other things, but I didn't have the heart to see that movie. Sully or Tully or whatever the fuck it was about, somebody struggling with weight gain after having a baby. It just looked so goddamn boring. But those first three movies that Diablo Cody wrote, goddamn, the dialogue was just hilarious. I still laugh like hell. I revisited Jennifer Bodies recently, and it's fucking funny. It's like, it's that weird mix of like distasteful, slightly cynical humor where they're trying to kind of shock and provoke and that sort of thing. And I love this sort of thing, but this movie is a little bit shocking, but just never quite goes for it. Even when they're talking about like having a period or masturbation or whatever the case may be, it's like, well, then go for it, lean into it. Like if you're gonna have a movie where people are getting their dicks chopped off and that sort of thing, like show me the ding-a-ling. Like let's just like embrace the unholy nastiness of this story. But it's like, don't give me the family-friendly kind of Disney version of a dick amputation scene. And there's one scene where the couple whips out a vibrator and starts messing around with like back massages. Like, all right, here we go. We have two teenagers in bed. We have a vibrator. Like, what else could we need for a great scene? But it's like, nope, we're going to cut away and we're not going to show you nothing. And I'm like, all right, well then your movie's probably going to fail because you are failing to deliver the red meat or the entertainment value that people want from a high school horror romance murder movie, whatever the case may be. But anyway, I think they forgot the fun. They had the perfect writer. They had the perfect cast. They had the perfect budget. They had, on paper, everything looked great, but none of it comes together. And maybe that's the job of the director to say, look, let's keep these ingredients. Let's get rid of these ingredients. The director should basically be like a filter. And anything that works to the movie's advantage should be allowed to pass through the filter. And anything that hurts the movie or distracts it or kind of compromises its intentions or distracts it with other things that it wasn't intended to do, well, then those are the things that the director needs to turn down, because you can't take all the ideas and put them all into the movie. Then you'll just end up with mud. And this movie, it never quite becomes the movie that it wants to be, like I said before. It just feels amateur, it feels unprofessional, it just feels kind of sloppily thrown together where another pass on the script, a few more takes on certain scenes, all those things might have worked to the movie's benefit. And as far as Diablo Cody's signature dialogue is concerned, maybe she's just aged out of writing movies about high school. She's a couple years younger than I am, and I am old as balls. So I think she's like 45 or 46, but she's got grown kids and that sort of thing. Like, she might have even been better off writing a movie about the school experience of her children as opposed to kind of reminiscing about her own misspent youth and that sort of thing. I don't know what the cutoff is, but at a certain point, adults just lose the capacity to write like children. Although there are other examples. Like, I don't know how old Mark Twain was when he wrote Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, but writing kids and writing teens can be incredibly challenging because I feel like most people make the mistake of either writing them as like precocious adults that have the knowledge and wisdom of adults but are in the bodies of a teenager, or they'll just write them as like the most obnoxious stereotype that you've ever heard of, like one-dimensional stereotypes who are completely, utterly boring. And this movie sadly kind of slips into that category where none of these characters ever really come to life, no matter how outrageous or, fun and gothy the attire of the lead character might be. But she is definitely an actress or a performer in search of a better movie. Kathryn Newton deserved a Beetlejuice-level movie to match her performance. But yeah, between this and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and easily the most loathsome part of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was her, which was the way she was written. I think she's an actress. She showed up, she hit her marks and read her lines, etc., and so forth. But I was kind of hoping that Lisa Frankenstein would be a great showcase of her talents. But maybe what's his name, Cole Sprouse? Maybe he'll come up. Maybe he'll get off light. Or lightly, get off light or lightly. He'll get off easy for this movie because he doesn't talk in the movie. He's a shambling mound of a corpse. So you can only do but so much harm. In any event, I think that's all I got to say about this particular movie. If you want to see Diablo Cody at her best, well then watch Juno. If you want to see a Diablo Cody horror movie that actually kind of works, I mean, Jennifer's Body is about as scary as eating an egg. It's not scary at all, but at least it's funny and it's sexy and it's exciting and entertaining and that sort of thing. So yeah, stick with those two movies and you can't go wrong. As far as future movies go, we're actually starting to get a few movies on the calendar now that I'm excited to review. I'll be seeing Madam Web next week just out of morbid curiosity. But then after that, we've got Drive Away Dolls, written by and directed by Ethan Coen from the Coen brothers. We also have, obviously, Dune Part 2 right over the hill. I'm seeing that on Sunday, February 25th, I think. So there's some cool stuff on the horizon that I'm excited to review on this channel. But I feel like the dead zone of the early part of the year when it comes to theatrical releases looks like it's starting to draw to a close, and maybe there'll be a lot more to discuss on this channel in the weeks and months to come. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, and letting me know what you think in the comments below. But thanks again for watching, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.